Hello and welcome back to Redirecting. This is episode 2 of the real estate investing series. Now, later on in the series, my husband is going to join us on some of the episodes. Right now, he is working on something very important, a project that he started some time ago, and he's trying to get it done before the spring. So I totally understand that. So he won't be joining us on every episode. I will be able to cover as much as I can in the episodes without him, but when he is able to join us, he will. We both have very interesting things that we like to talk about in reference to our experience in real estate. Now, in this episode, I'm going to be focusing on something very, very basic. Our first episode was more like an introductory into the series. And so with this, we're just going to focus on some of the basics, some of the basic things you need to consider before trying to go into real estate. Now, in the first series, we talked about our driving force being poverty. We wanted to put ourselves in a better position financially as our family grew. We didn't want to only have one thing that we were depending on, which were jobs at the time. Even though you may accumulate or rack up skills as you grow and you see various things that you can get into, various opportunities, you should never stop trying to create other avenues of income. Even within real estate, you'll have those who will change up their portfolio. They'll either add to their portfolio or they'll change what they invest in, such as, I've tried houses, so now I think I want to do duplexes or apartment buildings or something like that. And so I'm going to go ahead and get into this, the bare basics of going into real estate. There are questions you need to ask yourself. Why are you doing this? Okay, we understood why we were doing it, in which we share some of that. Of course, we wanted more financial security. We were in a very tough situation financially, and we saw opportunities in real estate back then that were, in my opinion, irresistible. They had a lot of creative financing going on back then. So you have to ask yourself, why are you getting into this? Is it something that you want to do to improve your life? You're looking for something to do? Because there are people who already have a lot of money who don't necessarily need this as an income, but they are just looking for something else to do. They're looking for a second stream of income or something else to get involved in because they may be retired or whatever. So there are a number of different reasons why people get into real estate, And I can probably say with all certainty that anyone who is watching this video, your reason is because you want financial security, or you want to be in a better position financially than you are now, And so whatever your reason is, there are things to consider. I hope that my audio picked up because my mic wasn't over here. About 3 minutes into the video, 3 minutes and 30 something seconds, but hopefully you could hear me even with the mic being way over here. I should have checked that, so I apologize for that, family. But anyway, I'm going to continue on. Once you determine why you're getting into real estate, the next question is, how do I fund this? Now, some people have money that they've saved up already. Some people are wanting to finance everything. Some people want to go into group investing, which I think group investing I'm going to talk about in a separate video. However you want to fund this, the next thing would be what type of real estate investing am I going to get into? And I would suggest either single family homes or duplexes. And let me explain that. With a single family home or duplex, you're most likely going to be in a residential area. Getting into apartment buildings, we'll talk about that down the line because that's something we did as well. That's a whole other puppy right there in terms of financing, manageability, all of that. So we're going to talk about single family homes right now and duplexes. Now, as I stated in the first video, we bought homes generally in Detroit, Inkster, and Redford in the southeast Michigan area. Now, we did look in other areas as well, but those are the areas that we were kind of situated in. We looked for homes that were very affordable initially. As we got into real estate, we began to look at homes that had a higher purchase amount, but we started off very low so that we could afford the house, first of all. Now, back then, in which the game has changed, so what I'm going to say is you might not be able to find the type of financing that we found back then, right? Back then, you had a lot of different types of lenders that were doing some extremely creative financing. Now, that's not to say that you can't find creative financing today, because we've been out of the real estate game for so long. We don't know everything that's out there right now, although I do know that some of the types of financing we had access to on a national level, they no longer exist. Okay. We'll get into hard money lenders in a later broadcast as well, because that's something else. Some of you might want to go ahead and do some research about it now, but we want to share our experience with hard money lenders later on in the series. But if you're in a position financially and you might have a certain amount of money saved up, for those of you who are not looking for the no money down option, you want to look for a home that is manageable for you. You don't want to get in over your head. Okay. We'll talk about that later in the series as well, because it's definitely possible to get in over your head. And that can mean so many different things. Either you don't have enough money to complete the task, or you don't have the skill to complete the task. Okay. Or you can go in the wrong neighborhood. Okay. So many different things to look at. Because we were in the southeast Michigan area, of course, we looked in Detroit first, right? And so we already knew what we were getting into as far as Detroit. We both lived in Detroit and grew up in Detroit. I wasn't born in Detroit, but the majority of my life was spent there, so I knew what to expect, right? I had gotten used to some of the things and some of the areas in Detroit to where I said, okay, we can do this. This area is manageable. And of course, at the time we were Christians, and so we trusted and depended on the Most High to protect us in certain areas, because we did have some situations, definitely. But when we set out to just really jump in, initially, I will say this, we didn't have any fear, but we did think that we had to get into this with others, right? And so I'm going to talk about the group investing later, but what ended up happening, I'm just going to say this briefly, when we tried to do this with others, they didn't have the same drive and motivation that we did. So what we decided to do, my husband and I, we said, you know what? We can't wait on other people to decide whether or not this is for them, or should we wait on this, or we should think about that first, and blah, blah, blah. Instead of doing that, we said, you know what, we jumping in. So we jumped in. We went for our first deal, and it was a house that needed a lot of repairs, but because we had access to lenders who were, let me tell you what some of the creative financing looks like. These were lenders who would not only lend the money. This is where the no money down comes in. Okay. Back then, right? I'm not sure if those type of situations exist today, but there were lenders who would not only give you the money to buy the house, but if there was enough equity in the house, they would also give you enough money for the repairs. So that was our situation back then. Of course, with that being on the table like that, we jumped all the way in and we dived all the way under, and we just went for the gusto. Okay. Excuse me. I would say in the first 6 months, I would say we bought about 5 to 7 houses. That's what I mean by jumped all the way in. We weren't holding back. We weren't slowing down. We were like, man, this is gravy right now. And so we bought houses that obviously needed repairs, repairs that were within our reach, within our budget. Now, I will say this. A lot of the work that we know how to do now, we didn't know how to do then. So we were paying others, in which we're going to get into that in a later episode as well. When we were paying others, it was costing us a lot of money. So let me give you an example. If you bought a house that was appraised for $50,000, but they were selling it for $18,000, and they gave you a certain percentage of the LTV, loan to value, and you took that additional money out of the house, okay, out of the equity of the house. And just say the equity that you were taking from the house for repairs, let's just say it was $12,000. Now, if you don't know how to do certain work, you could easily go through that $12,000 just paying other people to do the work. Okay, some of our very first jobs were like that. And when we look back, we felt very foolish. We were like, I can't believe we paid this man that much money to do that. That was our driving motivation to learn how to do some of this stuff ourselves. We took classes to learn how to do this stuff ourselves. It was a trade school that were offering free classes or very low cost classes. And so we said, you know what, we got to do this. We got to learn this stuff because I can't believe it cost that much money to do that, right? And so we learned very early on that you need to learn some skills. A lot of the houses needed, I'm going to say drywall repair, in which we were paying a lot of money for that foolishly paying a lot of money for drywall repair, right? And right now, drywall is one of the easiest things for Watchmen and I to do. And so you look back and you feel like you got that donkey sitting on your head when you say, I can't believe that this man charged us this much money to fix this drywall. Okay. So that's one of the things you want to learn early on is, first of all, buy homes within your reach. Okay. Is it too much work that you can't handle? Okay. If you know of people that you can trust who will give you affordable prices to fix certain things, that is fine. Because I do realize there are women who get into real estate as well, who may not necessarily know how to do certain things. But as women, we can't be afraid of that. There was a video that I saw not long ago where there was a woman in Detroit who was buying houses, and she was training a group of other women to hang drywall, repair holes in the drywall, fix floors, all kinds of things, right? And so those are very easy skills to learn. I know how to do a whole lot of stuff in terms of home repairs and fixer-uppers and, just different things like that. I know how to do a whole lot of things. I even know how to do roofing, but I would probably not get on a roof, okay? I'm afraid of heights. That's something that I would pay someone else to do. But these are skills that we can still learn, right? Now, I've watched my husband do plumbing. I don't know how to do plumbing, right? He knows how to do plumbing. I've watched him do electrical, okay? I don't know how to do electrical, although I can assist him. With plumbing and electrical, I know how to assist my husband with doing those things. But me, I don't necessarily know how to do those things. I know how to lay flooring, hang trimming, and hang walls, and do tile work on the walls, and drywall repair, and just a number of different things. I know how to help build cabinets. As a matter of fact, I believe I can build cabinets on my own, but it would probably take me a lot longer than it would take my husband. Okay. I wish I had it here, but there was something that I made back in Michigan. My husband used to have a workshop in our basement. And so we used to make various wood crafts. Okay. So there are a number of different things that we as women can learn to do if you want to get into real estate. You will find that it's fun. Okay. It's not just something that's time consuming, but it is fun. I need to take a sip of water here for a moment, family. Sometimes when you talk a lot, Your mouth starts to get dry, if you know what I mean. But, okay. So you want to make sure that you're going to get something that's within your reach in terms of affordability and the repairs. Any house that you are considering, you want to look at the neighborhood first. Okay? Do your research on the neighborhood. We made some very bad mistakes in Detroit buying houses. We'll get into that later. Okay? Some bad mistakes going into areas that we probably should have stayed out of. Get into that later. But anyway, you want to consider the neighborhood. You want to consider the values of the home. And later on in the series, I will show you how you can determine the values of a home just by doing what appraisers do. Okay. There is a way for you to learn or research the values of homes too before you buy them. You also want to consider the kind of help you're going to have. If you're going to go at this alone or if you're going to go in with someone helping you. So much to consider. Now, in terms of financing, if I'm just going to focus right now on someone who has the money to buy a fixer-upper with cash. Let's say in your neighborhood, there is a house that you can pick up for $15,000, but you know that the values can reach into the 50s or 60s. Depending on the repairs, this is what you want to look at. Go through that house before you make an offer. Look at that foundation. Look at the roof. Those are two of the major things that could be a big mistake in terms of buying and what it's going to cost you to fix things. You also want to look at plumbing. Those are major things. And electrical. A lot of times with electrical, you're going to have issues where you need to update some of the fixtures. Sometimes you have to update the breaker box. Okay. If they have those old fuse panels, that is definitely something that I would say you want to update. A lot of homes that you go into now already have a breaker box, right? So, but you definitely want to check that. So essentially you want to go in, make a list of all of the repairs and get yourself some realistic estimates on what it's going to cost to fix. And then you also want to determine what in this house can I do myself? Okay. What I mean by that, some situations that we've bought into, we would find a house that was, and then I'm also going to talk about REOs, bank-owned properties. Okay, I'm going to add that to the list because we bought a lot of bank-owned properties. Okay, I'm going to tell you how bank-owned properties can be a real, a real good deal for you. I'm going to tell you some of the strategies that we used that actually worked. But when you're making that list, you want to determine what you can do. Some of the situations we got ourselves into, we would buy homes that had a lot of stuff that was left behind in them. And a lot of people would go in, peek in the door and say, man, they left a lot of trash and garbage up in here. And so you might go away because of that. Not us. We saw that as an opportunity because usually when people leave behind stuff, it's a lot of good stuff in there. Case in point, there was a house we bought in Inkster, Michigan. We found money in the attic. Yes, we did. We found a lot of antiques that were worth a lot of money that we were able to sell on eBay. I mean, we found a bunch of stuff. We found one big coffee can that was filled with 50-cent pieces. A coffee can. You know those Maxwell House coffee cans? That the big ones, not the small ones. Filled with $50. Okay? And then that same house, no, I'm sorry, not that same house, but the house around the corner that we bought in the same area in Inkster, Michigan, we found authentic leather purse. Now, this is the kind of leather that ain't gonna break ever, okay? It would take a miracle to destroy this purse, right? But this purse was a thick leather purse filled with money and change. Okay, so you can buy into some really good situations with houses that are packed with junk. We bought houses that had a lot of good furniture in them, bedroom suites. Those are bank-owned properties in most cases. With bank-owned properties, sometimes you don't know what the situation is, why the person lost the house, if they're even still alive. Okay, and so we have bought into situations where there would be houses full of furniture, and I'm not talking about garbage furniture either. And so once you sign on the dotted line, that house becomes yours. The banks don't care about that stuff. They don't want it. They don't want to deal with it. As a matter of fact, that's another aspect of things where you will have banks that will hire people locally to go in and clean these houses out. They don't care what you do with the stuff. They just tell you, look, what is your charge to clean this stuff out? You can quote them $1,500 or whatever, and they pay you the $1,500. The stuff that you're removing becomes yours if you want it, or you can just throw it away. Whatever you do with it is yours. And so there's a lot of sweetness in real estate as well. So I think the best form of educating in real estate is to speak with someone or hear from someone, as in what you're doing right now, who have experienced certain things, so you know what you're getting into. Every experience won't be the same, however, okay? Like I said, I want to prepare you with the initial steps and what you want to think about before getting into it and all of that good stuff. What kind of tools do you have for repairs? Another thing, when going into a house that you're going to buy, I talked about the clean out. You could say, well, you know what, this house has some dirty walls, but the walls are in great shape. Okay. Painting is one of the easiest things that you as a real estate investor can do. Okay. Painting, right? Like I said, cleanup and painting, sometimes demolition, where you may have to tear out some cabinets or whatever, or remove an old disgusting toilet. Those are things that you can do yourself, right? Cleanup, all of that stuff you can do yourself. So you don't have to pay people to do that stuff. If you want to get that old dated sink out of there and put something upgraded, you don't have to pay somebody to do that. You might want to get a brother or a sister or a neighbor, because if you get a plumber to come and unhook everything, they're going to say, well, I got to do this and I got to do that. But if you have someone who knows how to shut the water off and detach things without having water spraying all over the place, have someone come to help you to remove those things. And then you can get into the business of fixing the house. Okay. And so you'll also run into situations to where nothing is needed but paint and maybe some carpet. I mean, we have literally gotten into situations like that where we got some serious deals on properties, and all they needed was a coat of paint and carpet. Another thing you can do as a person who's getting into this, a very simple task. Sometimes a home will have some disgusting, filthy carpet. Take the time, rip it out yourself. That's a very easy task. Getting the carpet and padding out of there is dirty. I would suggest that you get a mask and all of that good stuff. Get yourself some goggles. Get your work gear on. Go in there and do what you got to do. Okay. There are also some safety things that I would suggest. I remember there was one property we went into. It was disgusting. It wasn't just filled with stuff that people left behind. Okay. It was disgusting. Okay. It was so disgusting that we saw mice and stuff running all up on the window sills, all up on the curtains, and all up on the curtain rods. And as we were looking in there, I was disgusted and horrified by the mice, right? But we were looking around. You see that the house had a lot of potential. But I was a little nervous being in there because of the mice, right? So my husband went all up in there looking around, looking at the bedrooms and, just looking at the house in general. So when I saw the mice, I said, I'm out of here. I'm going to wait for you on the porch. I did look around, and I was able to see that it had an open concept kitchen that was open to the living room and all this different stuff. I said, wow, this is nice. Look at those cabinets, blah, blah, blah. And then I was out of there. Okay. I didn't want to go into the rooms and all of that stuff with my husband because I didn't know how many bins were in there and how many were going to try to leap on my head from I didn't want to get into all of that. So because my husband went all the way in, he started getting bit like crazy by some bugs. Okay. We're thinking that it was probably infested with fleas or whatever, because he got bit up so bad. He was like, oh my goodness, so there's a lot of things to consider when getting into real estate. You can go off into some very disgusting situations, and that was one of them. But again, it's really a very, for me and my husband, very fun business to get into, because once you get in there and you transform these houses, it's something that you can look back on, and also what was your goal in buying the house? Okay. Are you going to rent it out, or are you going to flip it, or are you going to stay in it for a while? Those are the things you want to consider too when buying your first house, because there are those in which this is going to be a whole other video, a whole other episode. There are those who will buy a house, stay in it while they're fixing it up with the intentions of flipping it a year or two down the line. That's another great method. Another great method of buying a house, especially if you're in an apartment and you want to transition out of that apartment. It is a great idea to find a house that is doable for you financially and in an area that you can tolerate. Go into that house, live in it while you're fixing it up, get it to where you want it, and then flip it. Okay. Of course, you want to make sure everything lines up. The things that you definitely want to do when buying a house, make sure that you can get the value that you're looking for. Make sure the house has the equity that you need to make the profit that you're trying to make. Because if it doesn't have any equity, then you can forget it. Okay. Let me just break down equity real quick. If you see a house and they want, I'm just going to say $25,000 for it, but it's only worth $30,000. That means you only have $5,000 in equity. So what if you have $3,500 in repairs? What if you have $5,000 in repairs? You have zero equity left. So you won't be able to sell that house. And it would probably not be a good idea to even rent it because you sunk all of this cash into it. And the only profit that you're going to realize is from the rental income. So if you're trying to flip a house, you definitely want to make sure that the purchase price is going to be low enough so that when you do go to flip the house after all of the repairs, that there will be some equity left for you to put in your pocket. Because what is the point if there is no equity in it? Okay. Now, of course, you can build equity over time if you plan on moving into a house and living there. You can build equity, but it takes time to build equity as well. Okay. And there are things that you can do to a house to increase the value of the house, right? But it depends on the area too. You've got to make sure that the area will pull that value, right? Because if the area won't pull the value, let me tell you the kind of scenario you can have. One thing we noticed when we moved to the South was you can have a big 4,000 square foot house that is in great condition, or just say average condition, right? Let's go with average. 4,000 square feet, 1 acre of land, average condition, but it might only be worth $50,000 or $60,000. Okay. You can take that exact same house and put it into a totally different neighborhood. Let's say take that home from the South up to Michigan to the north. Okay. Put it on an acre of land in a rural area or in the suburbs. That same exact house, 4,000 square feet, acre of land. That house will probably be worth $250,000, $400,000, $600,000, depending on where you place it. So it's very important to know the values of areas, because a 4,000 square foot house here might only be worth 60, but up here it might be worth 400,000, $500,000. You see? So those are some of the simplest things that you can learn about real estate before getting into it. It's a market that you can very easily study. Okay. One great tool for anyone who is getting into real estate, I would say, is Realtor.com. Realtor.com. That's Realtor.com. And the reason being is you can search houses in certain areas. You can search for sold properties within that area that you're trying to buy a home in. That will give you an idea of the value of the home that you're trying to buy. You can look how many bedrooms it has, how big the house is, the features the house has, so that you have something to compare. That's all most appraisers do, okay? They get homes in the area that are worth a certain amount. Of course, you have to go within the house, inspect the house, look at the upgrades in the house. So you do have those things as well if you are an appraiser. You look at this might be a newer home versus an older home, or you can have an older home with upgrades that brings it up to the status of a newer home. So a whole lot of things to look at there. But the biggest part of it in determining a value is to first see what similar homes are selling for in that area before you buy it, because you can find some slamming deals in an area, bank owned, or it's very rare that you'll have an owner who is going to sell a house, put it on the market, and have all that equity in it unless the house needs a lot of repairs. Okay, usually when you get a home like that, in our experience, is usually a bank owned property. Now, we have bought from private owners before who were desperate. They needed to get out of the house. They couldn't afford to do anything else with it. And they were like, look, if you give me X amount of dollars for it, I'll sell this to you. So you can find situations like that, but a lot of the homes that we bought were bank owned. And that's going to be a whole other topic, because I want to tell you how juicy it can be when you, and how you can set these deals up with these bank owned properties, because we're going to tell you some secrets about how the banks think. Okay, I'm going to tell you some secrets about how they think. I don't want to spend too much time on this episode. I'm already 30 minutes into it. I just wanted to give you another teaser, which is what to think about before getting into this. Okay. Just go back to the beginning of the video and just do a recap, take some notes on the repairs, the value of the home. How do you plan on financing this? Are you going to go into it as a group? Are you going to borrow the money? What are your methods of trying to obtain this? Like I said, in another episode, we will talk about lending practices that we were involved in and what they may look like now, which has changed the game tremendously. Okay. Being able to borrow for investment properties has been changed big time. I do believe those who are involved with credit unions, you might have a better chance at financing than others. But in terms of national lending institutions, you're going to have impeccable credit. Okay. In order to get financing for investment properties, okay? Because things have changed big time. They've changed big time. But anyway, I hope so far you are enjoying this series. Again, we want to give it to you a little at a time. We don't want to overwhelm you with all of the information in one video. And I do know that some of you all just want names and numbers and all of that kind of stuff. But no, we have to give you methods and strategies so that you can understand what you're getting into. And then we also want to prepare your mind for what to expect in this. It's not all easy, right? But for us, it was fun. Once we got into it, we were invested in it. We were committed to it. And so that's one thing you're definitely going to need, is a mind of commitment. Why am I doing this? Okay. Once you figure out why you're doing this, then the how and all of that other stuff will fall into place. Okay. And then also, I want to say this before closing out. If you want to do this with others, if you plan on doing this with others, if you know of others who would be interested in doing this, that is probably a good way to go. Okay, because the more hands on a project, the easier it is, the faster it goes, right? But if that is not possible, that's fine too. Initially, we had to hire people to do work, but we learned how to do that work ourselves as a husband and wife team. And eventually, we were able to get people who actually worked for us, and not necessarily companies that we were getting to do the job. So because when you have, once it got to a point, and we'll talk about this later, because I know I'll keep on going on and on and on and on in this video. Once we got to the point where we owned a whole lot of property, we were able to afford to hire young men that could come in and help us put these houses back together. We went to a place, what is it called? I can't remember what it was called in Detroit, but it's like a temp service that would, I can't think of the name, but temp services that knew of men labor type work. And so through some of them, we would find young men who had some skills. They weren't professionals, but they had enough skills to where we were able to hire them to get the job done. And we did eventually find some who actually had real skills, who were able to assist us on some things that we ourselves may not have known completely until after we took our classes. But again, it's a process. It's definitely a process. And as you grow into it, you're going to figure some things out on your own. Okay. So this was our second episode. We're going to get into it more. Like I said, there are a lot of things going to be covered, including investing in commercial property, apartment buildings, duplexes, all of that. One thing I got to say before I close out this first episode, if your first property is going to be a duplex or a two-family flat, that might be an excellent way to get into a home. If you plan on occupying like maybe one side of a duplex or the upper or lower level of a two-family flat, a lot of people do that. I wouldn't necessarily do it because I wouldn't want to live in the same place as my tenant. I know people even to this day who does something like this and it works out fine for them. But I wouldn't necessarily want to live right there next to my tenant because, sometimes tenants can be a trip. That's a whole other episode, okay? But if you can get tenants that you trust and you don't mind that sort of thing, get yourself a duplex or a two flat. They can pay you rent. And if you have a mortgage on it, their payment just might cover your mortgage payment. Ain't that sweet? You're living in your unit. They're living in the other unit. Their payment to you, okay, just might be enough to pay most of, if not all, of your mortgage payment. So you are essentially living rent free. Now, it's sad that some people don't understand that concept. You'll have some people who think that that's robbery. Oh my goodness. I ain't gonna get into that now. We have some stories that are so tripped out. People who really thought, okay, let me cut it off right there. We had tenants who were thinking too far ahead of things. But anyway, I don't want to give everything in one episode. I definitely want to make sure that I'm giving you something to think about in each episode and something to focus on. Okay. So if when we're talking about the commercial properties, we focus on that, that'll make it easier to follow along. Okay. So I'll just leave it at that. I'm going to close out this episode. I thank you all for joining us. And until next time, shalom.